In the news this week, a pillar of youth crime prevention on the decline. Former PCYC CEO's dire warning. A WAMA News exclusive.
Nurses and midwives contemplate strike as latest government pay offer rejected. FIFO mental health advocate Nigel Gold scoops another prestigious award. And later, Dr. Andrew Miller's comment.
This is The Evening News with Ivan Loon and Maliva Thorne.
Good evening. WA youth crime prevention is dead in the water. That's the stern warning from leading experts, saying if the Police Community Youth Centre doesn't go back to its roots and help disadvantaged children, it will soon become redundant. Ex-policeman and former CEO Jock Gillespie spoke out about WA's youth crime epidemic, saying juveniles are more at risk than ever before if PCYC doesn't change. He joins us exclusively this week. Jockey, thanks for your time. Are you saying PCYC is becoming irrelevant if things don't change?
If PCYC keeps going down or is going down the same path it has been over the last couple of years, yes, it will lose its total relevance in the community.
But is it irrelevant now?
It's getting close because, all right, yeah, we provide gymnastics, we provide all that, but what needs to happen is we need to focus on actual offender programs. We need to factor on youth programs that provide the impetus to treat those young people through the courts or otherwise. And I think it needs to work very, very closely, as I said before, with the WA police to actually understand their environment. If it doesn't do that and it loses that connectivity with the WA police force, then PCYC is dead in the water.
Youth crime is rampant right now, particularly in regional areas. PCYC is pretty much the monopoly service providing help to juveniles in the bush. Has it lost its edge?
Yeah, I believe that PCYC has lost its edge, and I believe there's a change coming up soon, and sort of advertised for a new CEO. So it's a great opportunity for PCYC to revisit what their aims and objectives are. PCYC, remembering where it started from, was actually established by the WA police. And therefore they need to maintain that connectivity and very strong partnership with WA police. In talking to some of the younger officers out there, especially after volunteering over the last 2.5 years, you found that PCYC has really lost its edge, its impetus, its impact with what it can do with juveniles and the police. And so really it's in a position now to look at what programs it can actually deliver that will actually assist WA police. We had discussions with WA police in the past about PCYC being the effective tool, the effective prevention tool that provides programs on behalf of the police to actually take care of those juveniles, but more importantly, not about juveniles that offended either, also about potential juveniles who needed programs to be developed, to be educated, to go into work, the employment force. And I believe that at this stage, I think it's lost its way. It needs to come back on path again, and I believe that it needs understanding of the police culture and, more importantly, that real strong partnership. Otherwise, PCYC will be like any other youth organisation in the metropolitan area.
Just before we finish, are there any specific funding needs for the youth crime prevention centres up north?
Yes, there is.
How much money do we need to help the kids to stay in the straight and narrow?
Well, I'm going back now. I've gone back about 4 or 5 years. I looked at a mobile program to function, moving through the towns using whatever facilities were there. I don't know the figure off the top of my head. That would change now. As we all know, costs have risen in terms of fuel, vehicle services, accommodation, everything. But there was a budget worked out in respect to what could be done. And instead of having a static facility, it's not about static, it's all about people, you could have a mobile facility as well as, and then work in closely with what community facility is actually available. So it can be quite cost effective.
Jock Gillespie, we're out of time. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ivan.
Nurses and midwives are contemplating another strike, with members of the Australian Nursing Federation unimpressed by the McGowan government's latest pay offer. There are also accusations that the government used the Industrial Commission to stop nurses from voting on the newest pay deal.
Frustrations over the latest pay deal are not over, with the Australian Nursing Federation accusing the government of attempting to silence health workers via the Industrial Commission. This week, the government has asked the Commission to stop the union's enterprise bargaining agreement ballot. But the union defied orders, saying the survey will remain until 3 p.m. this coming Tuesday. State Secretary Janet Rea met with health workers at Royal Perth Hospital this afternoon, emphasising the workforce won't be silenced.
The poll will tell the true numbers. There has been quite vocal sections of the nursing and midwifery cohort that have been against the offer. We've had enough. We've had 3 years plus of wages going down in real terms. The health system is in a mess. They've got no confidence in this government to promote the ratios correctly. We have negotiated the best ratios clause we can, and the nurses just don't trust the government to follow through with that.
The Health Minister, Amber Sanderson, said the government has never attempted to silence nurses and midwives. Rather, they want the health workers to consider the deal.
The Commissioner made a determination on the hearing on Friday that the conduct of the ANF had been potentially misleading to their membership, and that their role in eliciting that offer from the government had been potentially misleading to the members. That is why the Commissioner determined that they needed to communicate in a neutral way to their members about the ballot, and that the ballot needed to be paused so that everyone can take a breath and that the members can review the offer on its merits. Now, I would call on the ANF and call on nurses not to do that. Any illegal industrial action will only impact on patients.
ANF nurses and midwives are now considering whether a statewide hospital strike will go ahead based on the latest developments in the next few days. Premier Mark McGowan has called the violent restraint arrest against a 13-year-old boy from St James awful. The 13-year-old boy, who was allegedly kicked by an officer and mauled by a police dog surrounding a crime that happened last Sunday night in St James, still remains in hospital. The Premier commented on the situation and said there were reports people were breaking and entering into homes and damaging cars in the area. When being questioned about whether better safety measures should have been implemented for the young boy, Mr McGowan didn't hesitate to comment on the situation and the safety of police officers.
They didn't know they were children. There were children involved. Sorry, there was allegedly, this is all alleged, there was one adult, 3 children, or 3 juveniles. Released the dog. The dog was the 13-year-old boy was brought down by the dog. So that's what occurred. It's a very unfortunate situation. Had they known that there were juveniles involved, I'm advised they wouldn't have released any dogs from any vehicles.
Concerns have been raised over crime in WA's north, with family violence and youth crime continuing to plague the community. Figures show more than 200 incidents of family violence in the town of Kununurra, with a population of around 5,000 people only. Liberals Mining and Pastoral Region MLC Neil Thompson says the numbers are horrendous and the crisis needs to be addressed as summer approaches.
We see again in Kununurra 257 family assaults in the space of 3 months. This is in a community with about 5,000 people, the town itself maybe even less than that. This is a massively horrendous number. We see that is up from 157 the same time last year. We see a police minister who can't even keep control of the situation. We're not sure we're going to have Operational Regional Shield operating, Operation Heat Shield. We should be preparing. The summer months are always a problem. We need to be treating this as a crisis.
A pregnant woman has been assaulted in Jane Brook and police launched a manhunt over the incident. The incident happened at around 4:30 p.m. on Tuesday. A pregnant woman in her 20s was assaulted by a man in Sherlock Park. She received minor injuries and managed to run away from the park to a nearby address. Police described the man involved with an approximate age between 18 to 20 years old, dark complexion and thin build. Authorities believed he was wearing a red and blue basketball jersey. He was previously seen playing basketball in the area. Anyone with information should call Crime Stoppers.
The McGowan government's anti-violence legislation has passed the lower house. The protected entertainment precincts laws will apply to Perth's major entertainment areas such as Perth City, Fremantle, Hillary, Scarborough and Mandurah. Under the legislation, people who are convicted of sexual, violent and drink-spiking offences will not be allowed to enter those areas for 5 years from the day they leave prison. Anyone who breaches the exclusion laws will face a $12,000 fine and a jail time of up to 5 years. Police are also given additional powers to ban someone from the zone for 6 months, with the ability to impose another order for a maximum of 5 years. Further refinements will be made on the precinct, with city councils finalising the boundaries.
Award-winning five-fold mental health advocate Nigel Gold has won the prestigious Prospect Mining Safety Awards. The industry-prized accolade was presented in Perth this week, with Mr. Gold recognised for his efforts to promote Are You OK and Movember. Nigel even wore the Mo's suit to receive the awards, the cool suit that I aspire to wear if he raised $6,000 for men's mental health.
I've done it for many decades there, from Royal Flying Doctor Service, Movember, as you can see here, my loud, outrageous suit. But it's a matter of getting the message out. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay just to get help, you know, there's nothing wrong with it. So many charities and organisations, but it's all about bringing people together, listening. You never judge, you just listen. That's the whole key to everything.
So there you have it.
Nigel, you've done it again. And you're also wearing a Movember badge on your lapel, aren't you, Ivan?
Hope you enjoyed. Do you like it?
I think it's very nice, and I'm hoping to see the Movember suit soon.
But Nigel has to raise $6,000 for me to wear that. So, of course, he's getting there, but hopefully we'll get there soon.
Well, everybody better get on board and donate.
That's right. We'll recap this week's top stories again in just a moment.
But right now, here's Madeline Lombardi with Western Perspective.
Thanks, Ivan and Melly. Welcome to Western Perspective. I'm Madeline Lombardi. Perth Metropolitan Migrant Resource Centre is at risk of closing down as major funding stakeholders and government organisations are favouring mainstream organisations over local services. WAMN News exclusively spoke with MMRC Board Chair Lena Bakshi about the federal government's remarkable decision to redirect its funding. So, can you tell us why Metropolitan Migrants Resource Centre is at risk of closing down?
The Metropolitan Migrant Resource Centre is a small organisation serving migrants and has been there for the last 27 years, if you know, in the northern suburbs. As a small organisation, and it's not particular to us, you have to compete with much larger organisations for funding. Since 2018, there's been changes in funding at the federal level, because centres like us were set up to work or service the refugee humanitarian communities and also immigrants who were in need of a service. Since 2018, there has been a change in how services like ours are funded. Services with larger organisations with national footprints, and I don't want to name them, the funding has been directed to those organisations, and smaller organisations like ours have had to really, have been moved out of that whole funding paradigm. And so we've literally had to fight for other sources of funding to be able to just survive.
And speaking of funding in particular, as you were saying, with all the work that MMRC has done for the community, why do you think that funding in particular has been redirected to mainstream organisations in particular?
I think some of it is lazy funding policies at the federal level. Some of it is this whole need to have organisations that, to have like a a similar way of running services across the board nationally. So you have like one plan of how a service will be run, and then nationally everybody does the same thing. And in some ways that kind of runs counterproductive to a smaller organization, because a place like the MMRC is local. We have an understanding of what our community is. We have an understanding of what the needs are. There's also a trust that you build over 27 years of being there. There's also an understanding that in the 27 years, the needs of the community change. So a combination of maybe just changes in funding policies at the federal level and the impact of that on smaller organizations.
Things that you just mentioned was funding on a federal level, making decisions for local communities who know about what that local community needs in particular, which is why I want to explain, if you can name an example or explain some of the work that you've been doing, or a specific story of when MMRC helped a member of the migrant community, or kind of the work that you've been doing for local communities in that sense that federal governments don't know about. Things that you just mentioned was funding on a federal level, making decisions for local communities who know about what that local community needs in particular, which is why I want to explain, if you can name an example or explain some of the work that you've been doing, or a specific story of when MMRC helped a member of the migrant community, or kind of the work that you've been doing for local communities in that sense that federal governments don't know about.
Well, I suppose I can't say that federal governments don't know about, so I'll start with that. But so the MMRC has been involved in a whole range or a gamut of services. So we have a counselling service, and these services are funded by government. We have a counselling service, we have settlement services, which is settling new arrivals, humanitarian entrants and refugees. We have a homework club, we have a program that helps people who are trying to get back into employment and that kind of training. So the gamut, it's a huge range. But there is a disconnect between what happens at the federal level, I suppose. And the other part I think it's important to say is that WA is kind of, in a sense, far away from everything. So it's quite easy to not have us in the big picture. You know, there's all the larger states that seem to, take up the oxygen. With regards to a small story that you said, and it's really interesting, and that kind of taps into what I said before. So we have had the first generation of a family where we helped support them into kind of settlement. They came in as refugees and new arrivals. And we recently had their son who worked with us as an intern and came as an intern from UWA. So if you can see this kind of intergenerational stuff, that's what we do.
What do you hope for major stakeholders and funding organisations to realise of their decision to invest in mainstream bias in that sense? Talking about the locality of community and understanding what the community needs. What is your hope for these major stakeholders and funding organisations to realise in that sense?
I suppose funding organisations need to understand that there is a role for the local. That little organisations like ours don't need to continue to have to put us through the ring all the time to prove that we have a right to exist is huge. So that's the first thing. So they need to understand that there's a need for the local. They need to understand that funding needs to consider the local. And they need to understand also that small organisations may not have the kind of infrastructure and network that just allows for project. There's been this kind of movement towards, let's fund projects. Projects don't give you money to keep the lights on. Projects just are what is done. And so there's this kind of, they need to understand that little organizations like us also need that core money to be able, for a day-to-day, just to keep the lights on, pay the bills.
And now here is AMA WA spokesman Dr. Andrew Miller with his weekly COVID-19 update and medical commentary.
Hi, thanks for your time. Been another busy week with COVID news coming in from around the world on the 8th wave and the different legion number of variants out there which seem to be causing problems with hospitalisation at the moment. And of course this is the first wave we've gone into where we've dismantled pretty much all of the public health protections. So it's with some concern that we're seeing a fairly light touch from the government in regards to recommendations around mask usage and so on, and really just leaving it up to people's responsibility to take care of themselves at this stage. That's going to cause a lot of pressure on our hospitals, and we know at the moment they're under pressure already, with a lot of people having left the sector and others wondering why it is that the government can't give them a decent pay rise enough to make the work attractive to new graduates and to other people who might be thinking that they would want a career in healthcare. And it's going to be essential going forward for to maintain the entire system that people think they're being treated fairly in what is a market economy. And when you can make a lot more money by going and doing fairly basic jobs in resources industries, or by going into hospitality and not have the same level of responsibility for a large number of high acuity patients all at the same time, then that's a realistic factor that we have to take into account, that people will make career choices. So as we prepare for this wave and the one to come after that, and the burden of long COVID on our system, we would call on governments to be sensible and to be forward thinking, and to really look after those who will look after the rest of us when we're at our most difficult stages of life. So I come out in support of nurses many times previously, and I continue to do so, and I hope they get everything they deserve in the current industrial shenanigans that are going on. But don't be fooled by the politics of it all. The most important thing is that these healthcare workers need to be looked after much better than they have been before now. Thanks for your time.
That's Dr. Andrew Miller, and now a brief weather update. For those of you who have prayed for warmer temperatures, your wish has been granted. 27 on Monday with 12 degrees at night time, and a high of 33 on Tuesday with an overnight low of 15 degrees. 28 on Wednesday, 25 on Thursday and 25 on Friday. It'll be partly cloudy for the next few days, with rain settling in later during the week. And that's Western Perspective this week. We'll be back with you again next Sunday. Until then, Ivan and Melly, it's back to you both.
It's great to know that summer's finally coming. Thanks, Maddie. And now here's Leo with what's coming up on 6 News tonight.
Thanks, guys. On 6 News, 6 days to go. Pre-polling continues across Victoria as the Liberals face candidate scandals, but questions arise over what could happen if Labor wins the election and Dan Andrews loses. Fallout continues after an Upper House MP said she wants to turn the Victorian Premier into red mist. And the Medibank hacker releases close to 1,500 records in the latest batch of data to be put on the dark web. As you can see full details on those stories and plenty more by heading to our YouTube channel. Just search 6NewsAU to find us, or head to our website 6newsau.com. For now, guys, it is back to you.
Thanks, Leo. And that's our weekly news and current affairs. We have the latest news on our website, wamnews.com.au.
Don't forget to subscribe to the WAMN Extra News Club so we can continue our work in the community. Full details on wamnews.com.au/news/extra. From Melly and myself, I wish you good health, good night. See you next Sunday.
Thanks for watching.